Hey, thanks so much for checking out this video. The Canadian Church Leaders Network is all about seeding a hopeful future for the church in Canada by coming alongside pastors to serve, connect, and resource them as they go out and do the same for their communities. That's the vision. So if you're looking to be further resourced, connect with more church leaders across the country, or hear incredible stories of God's faithfulness in the church in Canada, follow us on Instagram by searching CCLN, visit ccln.ca, or subscribe to our channel below. Thanks again for watching this video. Have a good one.
Well, Helen, it's such a joy to be with you. I want to say you're one of the most encouraging people I've ever met, but I was really thinking hard about it this morning, and you might be the most encouraging person I've ever met in my entire life.
Well, that's very kind of you. I hope I'm encouraging, but hearing that is very lovely.
You're contagious in encouragement, and it's like, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on is like, you are such a champion of others, and I just love that about you. And so thank you for being here. It's great to have you as a guest today. And have you always been the most encouraging person in the room?
I don't know. I think it might depend who you ask.
Yeah.
John might not think that all the time, but
Aww.
Maybe he appreciates encouragement from me, but I certainly get lots from him as well. I think encouragement is one of the greatest gifts we can give people. Mm-hmm. And I feel I've grown up with such encouraging voices. Mm-hmm. I don't think I just decided to be encouraging. I think it's literally the environment I was raised in. So I'm grateful for that.
Who were some of those encouraging voices for you?
Oh, certainly my parents. Oh, they were just, they are. My mom is amazing. My dad's in heaven now, but truly the most encouraging. I got a phone call from my dad most days, even up until he died, to say, I hope you're having the best day. I've already prayed for you. I love you. I mean, that was my life, and how he loved my mom, and my mom's the same way. So I've grown up in a world of encouragement.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I think, it might sound like I'm being a bit cheeky and joking, but I really mean it. Like, one of the things I've experienced in random encounters with you. And it's kind of fun. You and John and I ran into each other in airports all over North America and at conferences and different places. And only recently been more intentionally connected, but over the years, lots. And I've always walked away going, wow, you've seen so much of the church, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. Mm-hmm. And I've just experienced you and John and your family as people who are very hope-filled, very open, and for others. And it's a real gift. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, we love the church more than ever. And we know that the church is not perfect because it's full of humans, it's flawed, but there is such beauty in the church. And I do think that often we hear sad stories, hard stories, and we can really focus on that. But there's so much beauty and so much hope for the future. And certainly Jesus believed in the church. So I'm gonna believe in what he believed in and keep building it with all my heart for all my days.
I've been trying to think recently. When I was a young speaker, I was really passionate. I was just getting going, and I probably didn't show on the outside how insecure I was, like just terrified. And I thought one day it would all go away. And I'm still sort of that young guy, still trying to find my footing, hoping that one day I'll just feel so confident, but I don't. And then I look back and I go, oh, there was voices who came alongside that wanted to correct and point me in the right direction. Yeah. Maybe their hearts were right. People that, but there's a lot of this, like, we got to make sure this guy doesn't get cocky. And what's so strange is I feel like that sentiment has, like, it almost got passed down. And then when my grandpa was dying, I would spend time with him in the hospice. And I had this note in my phone that was like, last conversations with Grandpa. And I would just say, Grandpa, what wisdom do you want to pass on? And some days he was more like cognizant than others. And some days it was more funny than helpful. But there's a lot of beautiful moments. And one of the things he said, and he's a really sharp, kind of critical guy. But he says, I've come to learn that more often than not, people need just someone to pump some air into their tires. Yeah. And it really hit me because he's a very sharp guy, and there would have been decades of his life, those who would have experienced what he'd been so. He's the guy at church that probably would have told the preacher, like, that was good, but you got this, and this wrong. Yeah. But in his last years, I experienced him as a humble guy who became addicted to encouragement. And the thing he wanted to pass on was like, mostly people just need some air in their tires.
Yeah, wow. I would agree with that. I think people do. We all do. But the beauty of someone like your grandfather, and I know that's true of you as well, is that when people are encouraging and when you know people believe in you and it's not just, hype, but they actually love you, then they can say the things to you as well that are hard, but you
Yeah.
hear them and you trust those words
Yeah.
because you know they believe in you and they're for you. That I think that those go hand in hand. So the people that I really love and care about, I feel like I can be an encouraging voice in their life, but I also can be a correcting voice.
Yeah.
And I've needed that all my life. My dad or my mom had no problem telling me, Helen, you need to get this right. But because it was so framed with belief in me, I trusted
Wow.
the encouragement and also the correction. We need both.
Yeah, I guess sometimes we create a false dichotomy that's like you can be an encouraging voice or a correcting voice. And it's like, no, like there's compatibility there, in fact. I love that. It's really helpful. Hey, I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, you and your husband, John, planted a wonderful church in Surrey that I have many friends that have spent time with, people who are in our church now as adults, spent formative years as part of your church. And so I'd love to hear just a bit about the story of establishing it. What year did you guys start?
We started the church in 1986. It always amazes me. We've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, and this is why you still have so much joy and excitement about it, which I love.
do.
So what was happening in the life, in the hearts of you and John that you're like, we gotta start a church in Surrey?
Yeah, it was the most unexpected calling, and it really was that. John was a dentist. John and I met in high school, Killarney High School, not that far from here. So I love downtown Vancouver where we're recording. No one is ever asking me to go out of their way to come into Vancouver. It's my happy place. And so we grew up here, met in high school, and John became a dentist after 4 years of marriage. He had graduated as a dentist. I mean, he was 25 years old at that time, and I was 22. And we had come from a pretty challenging marriage in those years. I mean, we thought we'd always just be happily ever after, but went through some hard seasons. And during that hard season, I really found myself a little bit away from God and really struggling in my marriage. And we moved up to Williams Lake right after he graduated and found ourselves in a local church there, a beautiful little Mennonite Brethren church, which is what I grew up. And that community, Caribou Bethel, welcomed us in. And the pastor there, who just recently went to heaven, and John Balser was his name, he was just the most beautiful leader, embraced us and loved us. And I think we fell in love with church all over again. I really believe we're doing what we're doing because of his input into our life. He saved our lives in so many ways. I felt like I was often in trouble in church, and John certainly was. We grew up in very different faith backgrounds. But when we came into a community that was so just hugged us and welcomed us and encouraged us. That might have been one of the most encouraging voices in my life as well, Pastor John Balser. But and from that place, we kept growing and moved back to Vancouver. John really felt he had a dream, actually, where God spoke to him about moving back to Vancouver. And we never thought that would happen because we were loving life.
And did he have a dental
His
practice in
up
Williams
there.
Lake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did 6 years of dentistry in Williams Lake. And it was successful and beautiful when God called us back. And then really felt, it's a long story, but a beautiful story, another just like vision of where we should go. And that we should open a practice, he thought, on number 10 and 152nd, which I went out there. He said, can you go look and where we can open a practice out there? There was nothing on number 10 and 152nd. There was one little drive-in restaurant, which I never frequented, but it was called the Rodeo. That's all that was there, and some like cows and things like that. And John, I said, John, you must have missed God. There is no way anyone's coming to a dental practice down here. So I said, but there's a place called Guildford Mall, and we could go somewhere around there. So right by Guildford Mall, he opened his first dental practice. And while we were there, we started a Bible study. Well, we took over a Bible study at my parents' house. They had a few people there, but that Bible study just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And we didn't know what to do with all these people because so many people, 70, 80 people were coming to my mom's house for Bible study. And so we rented a facility. Why would we do that for a Bible study? But we felt that we should do that. We rented a facility and we were like, dumbfounded. What do we do with all these people? And so long story short, Johnny talked to a pastor that was helping us in those days. We were going to Seattle and going to a church often down there. And he said, I don't know what to do. And he said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I'm a dentist. I can't pastor a church. I don't know what to do. I've never been to Bible school. I don't know what to do. And he said, just because everybody else can't doesn't mean that God wouldn't call you.
Wow.
And you can't. And so driving home that day from Seattle, John says, well, you better talk to Helen because I am not telling her what I think God is asking us to do. He came home and said, I think I have something I need to talk to you about. And I said, I know what it is. And he says, I doubt you know what it is. I said, no, I know what it is. And he said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, we're going to plant a church, aren't we?
Wow.
And he said, how do you know? And I said, well, God can speak to me too.
Yeah.
And so as soon as we realized that, then we rented a facility and started a church about 3 months later.
That's wild.
It was wild.
Now there's so much vocabulary and even infrastructure and partners and church planting 30 years ago, particularly in Canadian context. Obviously, church planting has always been around, but not in not in the way we know it now.
No, we had zero idea of what we were doing other than this passion and a sense of calling. Would I ever tell anybody to do what we did? Never. We did not know what we were doing.
How old were you guys at the time?
John was 33 and I was 30.
You know what's so interesting? There's something about how God builds our bodies through the ages and our minds and our whatever, the thing that drives us, you know, the ego, not in the negative sense. And there's some recklessness about your late 20s and early 30s that God uses to make things happen that I think, because even now, I'm just at that hinge point where I'm like, I don't know if I would do the thing I did 5 years ago again. But it was like, I could not do it. Anything's possible. And I guess what I'm getting at is there's something about how God uses what we don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, to be and then you end up with the faith or the courage to take a step that you otherwise wouldn't do. And all the better if there's people around you to support you and care for you. But I just think this, I just love the way God can step into moments like that. And you look back, you're like, I would never do that with conventional wisdom.
At the time, it was like we couldn't not do it. We had to do it. And so, I mean, I don't know other than just feeling an invitation from God. It seemed crazy.
It seems like it was something happening around you as well. Like you guys are caught up in something. People are coming.
Yeah. Getting saved.
Wow.
But we did tell people, because a number of people had started coming as well, because these meetings were exciting, that we're going to other churches. And so we recognized that it was no longer just a gathering. So we said, if you got saved here, if this is your community, stay. Everybody else go back to your churches. We're doing this. We were very clear that we didn't want to be pulling people out of church communities. Most of the people they had come along into this community, but it was also, you know, I look at it now, would we encourage somebody to do that and build that way? No, we have a lot more. I mean, we would do it in a much more ethical way. I think our hearts were right, but our way was wrong in some ways, but God used it. And we weren't trying to create any problems with other churches. We were just passionate. And I guess that probably happens to any new church plant, that there would be people like, why are you, you know, that you get people from other churches and that. But that said, we started and we just did what we knew to do. And I look back and we had a lot of passion, about 30 people that had really come. Most of them were related to me. And then we also had a lot of pushback. There was people like, what do you think you're doing? I mean, what qualifies you? You shouldn't do. We got a lot of pushback, but it was almost part of the making of us. We weren't defiant, but we recognized this was something we were called to. And I look, 38 years later, as passionate as ever about building the church, I think of what God has done through our church community, formerly known as Victory Christian Center and today Relate Church. I mean, we're still in it. We love it more than ever. And there's been so much life and legacy that has come out of what was built. And that is just the kindness of God, because we sure didn't know what we were doing. But that's why we're passionate about helping mentor and help with church planting today, because I wish there had been something or someone that could have really helped us build in a way that was a lot wiser, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, I love hearing that story. The first time I ever experienced I don't know if it was called Relate. It would have been Victory Christian Center maybe at the time, was as a teenager. and you guys were hosting Hillsong United.
Yep.
And it was like before they had totally taken off, but it was
Yep.
at the early stage where they just didn't realize how much resonance they had, I think.
Yep.
So it was like you guys were hosting them, and then the lineup was so big they had to do two
Concerts.
Do you remember?
Yeah, police
So
showed up. I know.
I was in line having the best time of my life waiting for the second one.
Were you?
And it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. I mean, I came from, in the best sense, such a great local normal church, but there was like, it grabbed my imagination. It gave me so much excitement. And your church has been able to host, or the church that you and John planted and now have passed on to Ange and Rod, which is beautiful. Hopefully we'll talk more about that. Has been a hub for a lot of ministry. You guys have been able to host a lot of gatherings and conferences and spur other people on. So it's just an incredible legacy.
It's
just
pretty
really honor
special.
you for that.
That was a great night. I remember we had to take all the chairs out of the building. There was no room for chairs and people. And we probably broke every fire code at the time, but it was fun. Something happened that was beautiful.
It was so amazing. It's so, so special. I'd love to chat about passing the baton. So there was probably a key moment for you and John where you probably started to talk really critically about, because you guys are still there. So the conversation wasn't like, hey, we're moving away or we got to start a whole new thing. It was really about saying, hey, is our time as the senior leaders of this thing coming to an end? I'd love to know, like, before the transition happened, when did that first seed of going, hey, we got to figure out when is our time to pass the baton? What was that like? What were those conversations like?
Well, John and I started talking about it when he was probably 60. He's 71 now. And it was a conversation that we know that this is going to happen. We want to do it well. I think we had seen some transitions not go so beautifully. We were very aware. Of course, we were traveling a lot at the time too and had a lot of exposure to other ministries. Probably at that point we were traveling probably 30% of the time. So there was a lot of key people being raised up even in our church and leadership. And then we did a sabbatical, and that happened, I think, a couple of years after that. And it was during that time of stepping away for just 3 months, but really letting go of everything, disconnecting completely. Maybe by the time John was 64 or so, we did that. And it was during that time, I think, things really began to formulate. And it was interesting because we had thought someone like Angela and Rod stepping in, Angela being our oldest of 3 daughters, and her husband, both on Team Angela, was our executive pastor at the time. And yet it was a conversation, but it just seemed like she was like, no, it's not us. There would be other people that looked maybe. And she was not, quote unquote, interested. Not that she was against it. She would do anything, I think, to help build the church. But she didn't really see herself. She always said there was no pressure on me because I wasn't a guy. If I had been John's oldest son, I might have had that pressure. But no one was expecting me. I was just Angela, kind of faithfully working in the background. And but then when the time came, we really looked at who would be the person that would care. You would know this as a pastor who's leading, that baton that you carry in that season is precious. There's a lot of weight behind it. There's a lot of cost. There's a lot of so much investment, your life investment, and you want to hand it on to the person that really considers that weight of it and will carry it into the future with the regard that it deserves. And so at first Angela said, you know that I would do anything. And she said, but it's not just my decision. Rod and I have to do this together. And I think Rod, our beautiful son-in-law, I think felt like Angela could do this, but I'm not sure that I could be, contribute as what needs to be contributed to this as well, because I believe if one takes it, you really both carry it, even though one is the lead pastor. Yeah. And so, then the day came that Rod felt, okay, I'm ready. And Angela said, if he's ready, we're ready. And then John thought it would happen in a few years, but he felt to move it up. Wow. And in hindsight, we transitioned fully. They carried the baton together. From 2018, we made the announcement. In 2019, early 2019, February 2019, that transition was complete. And that's already a bit of a tumultuous time. It's a beautiful time, but transition is never without cost and without, there's a lot of beauty and a lot of pain in it.
I've been thinking recently, I was just chatting with a a brother who's part of the Presbyterian church in the States. And he was the pastor of this church for a long, long time. And then he began to walk through the way the Presbyterian church does transition. And there's a very specific policy about who has the decision in the denomination. And then he was talking about the pain for him and the challenges and the upside too.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is like over the years, there's so many different models of church governance and of succession, of passing the baton. And there's not one model that isn't without deep challenges, deep pain, risk.
Yeah.
You know, it's like so interesting because I think it's always good to have really prudent, thoughtful governance. But there's this myth that there's going to be a strategy or a pathway for something as significant as succession or that eliminates all the downside. And it's like, nope, this is just one of those ones that's like, there's always risk. There's fear, there's emotions. And I think that might be why sometimes I think succession doesn't happen when it should, or when it does happen, it can be more painful than necessary because it's just such a tender thing.
It is tender, and I think it's maybe one of the most important things we've ever done in ministry. A beautiful moment happened that John has shared this with a lot of other pastors that are questioning about transition. And, you know, as I shared, we knew that this was the time and this was the person and this is what it needed to look like. But Angela was leading a team meeting, you know, where all the team, people who serve on team, volunteers, and it was just this big kind of a rally. And it was probably about October before the transition where it's going to happen in February. And as she was leading it, John was sitting in the front row beside me, and she was teaching about the church. And John just felt the tap of the Holy Spirit on his shoulder. And he said, "That's your pastor." And he looked over at me, and tears are falling down his face. And John doesn't do that often or readily. And the tears are just falling off his face. And he said, "God just spoke to me." And he just confirmed, "That is your pastor." And so when he said that, it was such a beautiful confirmation.
Wow.
Because I think a lot of pastors, even in transition, and he's asked other lead pastors this, as they're questioning and about the ability to let go, is will you respect them as a pastor to you? And I know not everyone's going to carry on in the way that we did, where we have stayed within the church community and are helped building it and love it more than ever. But that was such a freedom for John. And John's a strong leader. John is he's that kind of type A driven male. But it was beautiful to see this assurance in his heart. And I think for Angela, and of course, I mean, I don't know. There have been lots of phone calls. I need to talk to Dad. Because Dad is her pastor. He will always be that. But it's a beautiful mark of, and I think it's very humbling and beautiful. I mean, in the most genuine, heartfelt way, to let our daughter and her husband lead us into the future. It's stunning. But I feel that was a gift from God to give John in that moment, to just let go. And trust what God was going to write and how he would write the story for the future.
Oh, it's so special to hear. And I love that, you know, you guys are still there cheering it on, and it's changed. We had Nikki Gumbel on recently. We were chatting quickly about succession, and I was like trying to see, like, has it been hard? And, you know, he challenges, and he's like, it's amazing. Like, they're doing all these things that, you know, it's just so cool. He's like, it had to change. It had to change.
Yes.
And he goes, different things that he would have done, but it had to. And it was so interesting to hear that conviction, like, it's about time. Like, that, it's so interesting because it's a painful thing to watch something you made change and evolve. But what's that been like for you guys to be front row, to see part of the DNA that you guys planted stays the same? Like, some things about Relate is just never changing. Like, it's deep in the DNA, the hospitality, the faith, the hope, all those things, love for the lost. But then there's new sort of flavors and approach they've brought in. What's that experience been like for you?
Absolutely life-changing. I've needed it. I think this last season has been so complex for the church in general and for the whole world, having come through like a crisis in the world and watching the church emerge. I think her leadership is taking us into the future in such a unique way. And we needed it. I think I needed it desperately to just have fresh eyes and to believe in the future. And we need to be ready to be led by the future. It's already the future. It's here now. I'm not waiting for the future. It's right here, and I'm loving it. And yes, it looks different. I think there's always going to be what's in the soil and in the heart of, like you said, was planted. But I need this to go forward into my future too.
Wow.
I don't want to ever get stale or get old. The freshness and the beauty of what's happening in the global church right now is absolutely breathtaking, and it doesn't look like the past. I love the past. And I love what God has done. I think it's Kierkegaard that said, life is only understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And I think that's so true for the church right now. Let's go forward.
Come on. You and John have a unique vantage point because of the ministry you have globally, to be able to speak at churches, encourage pastors. What's some of what you're seeing that is encouraging?
Oh, where do I start?
I know it's a tricky question. It's one of those ones that's like...
Well, I think you're an example of it. And so many beautiful churches. I think there is a beauty in the story that is being written. I think there's... we're not as impressed with the production. We just want encounter.
Yeah.
I think that I look at a lot of what we've done in the past, and I don't want to be critical of it. We did the best we knew, but a lot of it was about, I don't want to say we were performance driven because it was so heart and soul what we wanted, but we cared about the production, the lights, the camera, the smoke, how we did it, a spirit of excellence. We're still passionate about that, but I don't think the future cares about all the things. They just want encounter. They want to walk into a room, and that's always mattered to us. We want to be a church that feels like home, but I think we spent a lot of time, energy, and finances on, I don't know if the right word is production. I don't want to say that in a cynical way. I'm not cynical, but I just feel things have been stripped back. We want to go back to the basics, that we want a really great church experience. We do, but the most important thing is an encounter with Jesus. And if that means that we didn't get the sound perfect, or we didn't get, the people sang off key, we want to have it the best. But I just think people are looking for Jesus. I think that's everywhere. And I think there was a lot of loss, a lot of what was normative before, where we had all of access to so much more. It felt like it got stripped back. But I think the stripping back has been something very pure and beautiful. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think it was cool for me to experience you looking back. Because I think there's oversimplified narratives we sometimes make. Like, we used to be about production, and then you equate it with performance or something, which is not a fair equivalent, because it's like it assumes that there wasn't substance beneath the excellence or beneath the... And then there's a new generation that comes up, that think about my kids, how media aware they are, how they understand, and how they experience authenticity is different than...
That's exactly right.
And so I think that every model or value needs to be pressed to know what shadow side is here. So what is the shadow side of excellence or production? Is it's possible for it to become the wrong emphasis. It's possible for it to appear one way, but behind the scenes there. But it's not always. That's just the shadow side of it. But it can also be a way to get the word out further, a way to find resonance in culture. But what happens when the same culture you're trying to reach now is skeptical of things that way? So then you have to ask the question of, like, okay, how we did it then is not how we do it going forward. And I think we need to be kind to how we did it then. I guess that's what I love seeing. Like, we always tell these narratives, like, either that's the winning ticket model of church, and then it goes sideways or something, whatever, name the church, and you go, so therefore it's all bad and wrong. It's like, no, it's not that simple. It's way more nuanced. It's way more layered. And there was how we did it then. God was kind to us then. He worked within it. And there's some new things he's doing. And I think it just was really special for me to even hear you reflect with such humility, but even kindness towards the past and excitement about the future.
I think our hearts have always been right and wanted the presence of God, and always to create a place that everyone felt welcome and could feel loved and felt seen. I think that felt really, really important to me. But I have recognized when you talk about your children, it's a different generation. I think that, so John and I have had the biggest surprise of our lives, being 68, big old number, 68 and 71. We feel like we've never had a greater closeness with this really young generation.
Wow.
I think this young generation is craving authentic voices. I put it this way: they can ask Siri or Google anything, and
Yeah.
they have, or they can go. There's no end of information and things available. But I think having presence with people that still love each other. We're going to celebrate 50 years next month of marriage. I mean, that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Madly in love with each other, still love the church, love this young generation, love it so much. We are, and yet still feel the privilege of having a voice into their lives. I don't think they've written us off. As a matter of fact, I feel like we've become more important to this generation, and I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. I just think that trusted voices that have gone the distance and are not cynical or haven't given up become really valuable in an age where there's so many voices and young people want to know who we can trust.
Wow. Yes and amen. There's such a need. There's such a high need. Sometimes I never grab their faces, but sometimes I want to grab the face of healthy, godly people in our church in their 60s, 70s, 80s and say, just don't go. I'm sorry for the volume. I'm sorry for how sporadic I seem sometimes. Just please, obviously if people can go and come, but we so need the generations there. And sometimes one of the things I lament is when someone in an older generation goes oh, I'm not needed here, sometimes that's because they're like, oh, I don't know where my place is. I'm like, just you here as a picture. And then the relationality and being open to connect with, and it's doing more than because I think people are looking so desperately for a way that works. Can I see a sign of a life? Yeah. I think there's these deep, I don't even know if those who are part of Gen Z can even articulate it. My millennial peers for sure, but younger, all the more. They've been pitched so many answers for how to do life, but it's all crumbling.
Yeah.
So the image of a family or a person who has done life, and it seems that there's a measure of health and joy, love for God, and that is such a powerful part of how we pass on faith to next generation is to present that picture. And it's the work of presence. And I just long for multi-generational churches that reach the next generation. Sometimes it's to reach the next generation, we need to become a young church. It's to reach the next generation, we need to be a multi-generational church.
Absolutely. I've always believed, and I've preached it for decades. We need voices as old as our mothers and voices as young as our daughters or granddaughters in our lives. I need them all. We really need each other a lot. But I do think a lot of times we live in a world that doesn't really regard age. There is a thing called ageism. It's real, but it should never be real in the church. We are so needed. And so it's interesting, 2020 hits. John and I have transitioned the church. We're no longer leading the church. We're there, but we're not leading. And then travel. Our schedule was completely booked all through 2020. I mean, we had so many places to go and things to do. We had a busy January, February, March 17th, I come home. And I am sitting at home. I'm watching what's going on in the world. And by about August, I'm having a bit of a crisis inside. I don't know who I am if I'm not Pastor Helen leading the church, or I'm not traveling around doing, and there's nothing on the agenda other than, hanging out at home. And all of a sudden, I recognized I was very comfortable in those roles. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm here for a reason. And I was reading Eugene Peterson's book, The Contemplative Pastor, which I had for ages, but I'd never taken the time to read it. And now I'm sitting on my deck on a beautiful August day, looking at the ocean, and I'm having the tears didn't stop falling. They just
Wow.
kept falling and falling. And I looked at his life, he's been a real mentor in my life from a distance, but I just so have loved his leadership, and his writing has always touched me deeply. And I looked at his life, which was so contemplative, and I realized I had been running, and going and, yes, hanging out with Jesus, talking to Jesus, but really not being contemplative. Like he'd talk about go for a walk and read poetry. And I'm like, who has time to go read poetry or whatever? I've got, sermons to write. I've got things to do. Yes, I've done my Bible study. But it was like an awakening from my soul. I feel like I became a new person on the other side of that encounter with Jesus. And I feel like it opened up something on the inside of me to really embrace this season, to not feel I'm done. I mean, not that I thought I was done, but I didn't really know what I'd do if I wasn't doing these other things. And it feels like out of that, God has opened up these beautiful doors and avenues that look quite different from what I was doing, but feel really precious and special, including being involved with CCLN. Thank you for the privilege of being part of the Emerging Leaders Lab. What a gift it has been to my heart to meet with these young leaders. And thank you for trusting me with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to let you thank me for that. Like, we're so grateful. Like, for context, I think listeners probably have heard us talk about one of our programs is for, younger-ish leaders in their 20s, their 30s who want to go the distance in ministry, aren't in a senior role yet. And when we were designing the program, one of the things that we really wanted was if it was a group of 20 or 30, that each of them would belong in a smaller cohort, and they'd have a mentoring pastor or a guide. I think that's the language we use as guide, which I love, because I think in life we need a guide. We need somebody that's just gone a bit further on the train than us, can tell us we're going to make it and say, look out for this and this. And we kind of made our dream list, and you were on our dream list of people of like, I wonder if maybe Keith Taylor or Helen or whoever would say yes. And we're just so thankful that you would say yes to invest time in young pastors. And this is going to sound like a leading question, but I do want to ask it anyways, is like, why would you say yes to something like that? Why is that important for you to invest those hours each month and on Zoom and to come in person when we meet up to be with those young pastors?
Oh, it's a dream. I honestly, I think going back to earlier in our conversation, had I had that when we first started, I can't imagine what a gift that would have been to my life. And I look at, I've gotten to know some of the guides all of the guides now. And I look at the quality of people. I kind of feel like one of these things is not like the other. I feel like they're so seasoned in what they do. And I feel like I'm a little bit, unique in that, but I love it. And honestly, the gift has been to my life to connect with these beautiful young leaders, so passionate about building the church and so committed to go the distance as well. But, one of the things that you made us do at that first retreat was to write our eulogies, and I listened to their hearts. It was so beautiful. I'm telling tales about what might happen in the future, but honestly, to hear their hearts, and they were all in their mid-20s, I think, right around there, and what their dream was to finish strong. And I think to have that dream now, and then to be able to come alongside these beautiful young leaders that are facing a lot of life situations, they're newlywed or starting dating, even that, being able to lead them in those parts of life as well as in pastoring. It feels like a gift to do that.
Oh, we're so grateful that you invest that time. It's interesting, even the examples you gave there, because I think a lot of times when we think about ministry development, especially early on, it's like there is like skill building. I need to learn how to write a sermon or do pastoral counseling or lead a board meeting, whatever it is. There's skill development. But so much of the things that actually suck us out of ministry or cause harm to our ministry is not the lack of skill development. That's important. It's actually the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And how do you, and I've been thinking, I shouldn't verbally process too much on the podcast, but this is my space to verbally process with you now, is I wonder if one of the messages to young pastors is like, while you're building a ministry, put more attention on building a life with God.
Yeah.
And your ministry is a big part of it. It's important. It's not small. It's significant. But I just remember my frame was build a ministry, not in like an ego way, but that was the thing. My career, all this stuff. But the actual things that caused my ministry to flourish, or what's the opposite of flourishing? Languish. it's not the lack of skill development alone. It's actually when my life outside, my personal health, my friendships, and even for people like having to experience dating well, like you mentioned that, like well in ministry, it's like that's a real reality.
It sure
And
is.
to not be fully alone on that, to have other people who've been like, yeah, you're going to be all right. And this is a good thing to invest in, and you're not alone, you know?
And I think that's been a really big part of our conversations, as well as skill development. And they get that from the lab. It's such a great program for that. But I mean, I know that if John and I didn't have a strong marriage, and we've always worked so hard to have a strong marriage because that's something we almost lost. And I realized our family comes out of the health of our marriage. So our marriage has to be a priority. And then obviously our family, and out of that we build a healthy ministry. If those aren't working, you know this, Jason, if your marriage isn't thriving and your family isn't thriving, it is really hard to give what you need. And I think a lot of times, truthfully, pastors feel really successful in their ministry, and you know the numbers show it, and everything else feels like we're growing, but they're failing in their personal life, and eventually one catches up. And I think a lot of people quit because of that. So to go the distance, to have people come along and help you in relational stuff, I think is really, really important. So yeah, we've talked about that a lot.
Do I understand? You're doing it again with us? You're doing another round? Thank you.
Thank you.
We start in a few weeks.
Yes.
I think as this episode will release just after we would have had our first retreat with a new class.
Wait.
It's so fun. I'm so looking forward to meeting, ascending off the last year's class and meeting this new class. It's such a gift. You and John have also recently been able to partner with some other pastors to host retreats for couples in ministry. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, it's beautiful. It's been a dream of John's and mine as well, talking about who are we when we're not doing what we were doing before, but we've always had this dream. Well, I shouldn't say always, but I think recognize that it's really essential that there is a safe place to gather pastors, senior pastors, you know, husbands and wives, to come along together, and a place where it's really relaxed. We do a 4-day retreat, and we go to this beautiful place. And I don't know if we'll always meet there, but where we get to meet right now is ridiculous. It's so gorgeous. It's like this mansion. It's just the other side. It's in Linden, and it's so beautiful. And we bring in a chef and a sous chef, and we spoil these pastors, and they're able to come in. And it's free of charge. It's underwritten. We're able to do it for 8 couples at a time. Well, the format is so simple. It's just the environment where we go is stunning. It's absolutely beautiful. And everything that you'd ever want is in this house. It literally is like a mansion. And we are blessed to be able to use it. And so the only absolute requirement for them is to come to dinner in the evening. And we sit at a long table. And this is where we get real. And you don't talk about how big your church is. You don't talk about all your successes. This is where we talk about what's real, what's been the hardest part of your last year.
Yeah.
It's very open. One of the beauties is rarely does anybody know each other. So we've met couples we didn't know at all, because they come through Pastors Collective, which is something that's run out of Charleston. That's headquarters is Charleston. But they do it more for just men or just women, but John and I have had a heart to do it for pastors. And so it gets really real fast. It's surprising. And I think just the length of it really makes a time for relaxation for pastors. Many times they go where they're getting another seminar, and that's all good. But just for them to have time together, to have conversations with other pastors that are lead pastors from really around North America. They've come from everywhere. Have honest conversations, have fun, great food. They can sleep in the afternoon or in the morning as long as they want. But the only thing is we just require that they have honest conversations at the dinner table, which opens up lots of other conversations. It's been absolutely, I would say, miraculous what has happened in that environment.
That's so special. When I was chatting, Ange and Rod came out to one of our retreats, and she was just expressing how meaningful this has been for you and John to invest in other pastor couples together and to create that space. And I've had the same experience as you, where I'm quite surprised. Sometimes when we're even doing a CC on retreat, we'll be like, we should probably put more on the schedule. And then we go, no, don't fill it. But then you kind of wonder, like, is this going to work? Like, people are coming all this way? It feels almost risky. Like, we don't want to, we so honor people's time. it's just amazing when you set the table literally, but also metaphorically.
Yeah.
Make space, invite God, and be present. How much healing, how much re-envisioning.
So much ministry happens
Yes.
that is so meaningful. And some of them have come like exhausted. Some have come that escaped suicide. I mean, the stories have been pretty horrific that have been happening in pastors' lives over that. I mean, you would know the statistics that Barna had, that how many pastors would quit tomorrow if they had another job to go to. It hasn't been for the faint of heart. So if we can provide, and it feels so small and intimate, but I think that is the wonder of it as well. And so sometimes you think, is it, yeah, I just know it's miraculous. And if we can, so this, I know Pastors Collective currently is able to accommodate about 500 pastors a year.
Wow.
And so we are accommodating a much smaller number, but if we can see close to 50 pastors a year, that's a lot that we're able to invest into the lives of.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and what a gift to our heart as well. And but I would agree that we feel like sometimes when John told me the first conference or the first gathering, we had nothing on the agenda. And he said, trust the process. They've done it at Pastors Collective in Charleston. This works. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to go somewhere where I'm just going to have to sit. And I am really outgoing. I make new friends easily, but that kind of freaked me out. I thought, nothing's on the schedule. He said, no. We're going to just trust the process. And we have seen the wonder in it.
I've been having lots of conversations recently with pastors in Canada, particularly, who maybe they hear about something like this or one of the programs CCON is doing. I was just out on the East Coast. We had an awesome pastors meetup. And someone very appropriately was like, hey, so much of the stuff you're doing is West Coast. It's just not accessible for us. And I totally feel them. And it's like, I wish we had the resources to scholarship, all the travel needed, but we just don't. But I really mean this sincerely. I was like, hey, you're qualified to gather people together and do this. Like I said, this guy, and he's like, because he was kind of saying like, oh, I wish I could access those things. I'm like, no, like, I feel like as you're saying this, like there's probably some people saying, I really need that retreat. And, there are great retreats, even family life in Canada. There's all these different things. But also, I think some people listening need to create these spaces to say, I'm going to carve out 4 days. We might not know a mansion, but we do know someone in our church that has a cottage, and I can invite 3 other pastor couples, and maybe we'll just, I just think that there's something about saying, I just think there's something that as you're talking, I think for somebody listening is meant to be, they're meant to create spaces like this.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think that if there's a desire, and I think there is, that we could do it. Like John and I, we just got back on Monday night from just 2 days ago from being all over Scandinavia. And they're like, hearing about this, like, could we do it in Scandinavia? And I said, yes, you can.
Go for it.
And if you need us to come, we'll come.
Yes.
We'll come. We'll
So
go
good.
anywhere. We'll go to Halifax. We'll go wherever. I love that you were there because we hear those stories as well. It's like, will you come to us? We're so far away. And one of the beautiful girls in my cohort is from Halifax, or just outside of Halifax, and she's so lovely, and she's part of the ELL group.
Yeah, I think she came to our meetup, which was so fun.
She sure did. Yeah,
Aww.
Yeah, she's beautiful, and
So good.
Anyhow, it's wonderful.
I just think there's something. It's easier than I think people think. Like, set the table, invite people to come, see what the Holy Spirit will do. Yeah. Even like pastor cohorts, like we love the programs we do, but like, really all we're doing at the end of the day is saying we're going to carve out intentional time every month to be together, to hear each other and talk and listen and invite God. And I think that every pastor in Canada needs to belong somewhere. And there's great ministries hosting it, but we need more people to say, I might not feel qualified, but I'll convene. I'll set the table.
Great advice.
And that excites me.
I have a feeling someone's listening right now and saying, you know what, I can do that.
Yes.
I could do that. I've got a place that has 4 bedrooms. Let's hang out and create that space. It'll be miraculous.
I love that. Last thing I wanted to chat about is you and some amazing Canadian friends have been hosting a TV program called See, Hear, Love.
Yeah.
And I just love to hear about it. Like some of like Anne Miranda's a good friend of ours.
She's great.
She this last season she was part of it. I know Melinda's like the host of it, and Ann Voskamp. I'm missing. Was there anyone else on the?
Yeah, Trifina is her name.
I don't know Trifina.
Yeah, she was new to me as other than I've watched some of the programs. She's fantastic.
And what were you guys? You guys had a specific theme to go
did.
after this year. What are you guys chatting about? And,
We looked at unknown women of the Bible, and all of us took one of these groups of women or women. So I talked about the midwives that rescued future leaders, that stepped into a story. And so we found these beautiful women that are in the Bible, and they're mentioned by name, and God knew their name, put them in the Bible. And so it may not be Ruth or Esther, which are two of my favorites, but there's just these women that are hidden, but they have these incredible stories. And so we just unpacked that. And I think the real goal of it was to let everybody know that God has written you into the story, and you can step into that story and be who God called you to be. So it was so much fun. I love that it's all Canadian girls that are at the table, and we're on the books to do another one. So
good.
I'm pretty excited about that.
do you know how people can access that?
Yeah, if you just See Hear Love, you can get them on YouTube, and they also just See Hear Love, and you'll just see the podcast or on YouTube.
I've seen
so good.
I've seen clips come up in my thread, and I just was so struck by the vitality and life and joy and conviction diving into scripture together. Such thoughtful commentary, such an incredible team of women pulling together to go, let's build a resource that's going to serve people and take them deeper into the word. And so thanks for doing that.
Oh, it was, again, my greatest honor. Yeah, they created a downloadable Bible study out of it that you can gather with other women. And so many people did it. It's so exciting to see what's happening at other tables from it.
I love it. Well, Helen, I think you're the most encouraging person I know. I'm grateful for you.
You're really kind,
So
Jason.
thankful for you and John, your lives, your humility, your optimism for the future, the way you care for other pastors, for working together with us. We're just so grateful. And thanks for making time to come visit me in person. It's way better than Zoom. It's good to be with you. And thanks for sharing this conversation today.
It's been such an honor. Thank you.
Hey, before you go, we want to let you know about a few things we do here at CCLN that might serve you as you lead yourself and others. First, we have a podcast. The Canadian Church Leaders Podcast features brand new episodes every 2 weeks, featuring conversations with church leader voices from across Canada and the world. We also send out a newsletter to our network every month that contains helpful resources and content that our team curates for pastoral ministry in the Canadian context. If you or your church wants to partner with CCLN in our mission to lift up and serve pastors across Canada, we invite you to consider making a one-time or regular donation. You can do that or find out more at ccln.ca/partner. Thank you so much for watching this video. From myself and the CCLN team, we love you and we are cheering you on.